Hey everyone, I'm Carol Carnes, and welcome to Living Consciously. Well, I don't know about you, but I've been fascinated lately with animal stories that you see on Facebook. The one about the chimp that Jane Goodall saved from a life of cruelty and experimentation and kept him a while so that he could recover and heal, and then she set him free in the wild. And maybe you've seen this one where the chimp comes out of his cage in this beautiful sanctuary area, goes back in, comes out, goes back in. He's not sure. He's never been free before. And then finally he decides maybe he likes this, and he comes out a little farther and he looks around and realizes, oh my gosh, there's no cage. And then he jumps back up on the top of the cage and looks at Jane Goodall, who's standing next to it, eye to eye, and then reaches out and gives her the most wonderful, loving hug for a long time, and then takes off. And it was as if he was saying, thank you. You know, my friend David Leonard, who's another minister in Alabama, said to me recently, I love it when you tell your animal stories. Well, they have a relevance to our New Thought teaching. And my favorite one that happened to me many years ago, I was visiting my daughter, Maggie, who lived in Oceanside, California at the time. And she had a cat named Beach. And Beach was a very kind of shy little, sweet little kitty. But one day I came downstairs and she was looking out of the sliding glass door, doing that cat attack thing. You know, their mouth goes, and their whole body shakes, and you could just see she was just quivering. Well, she was looking through the glass at a little rodent. I think it was a chipmunk or a little baby squirrel. And it was just sitting there, and she wanted that. Oh my God, she was going to go get it. And so I said to my daughter, well, let her out. Maggie was horrified. She says, Mother, I'm a vegetarian. I said, well, your cat isn't. But let her out. Let her be a cat. So she did. And Beach goes tearing out there and stops in front of the little chipmunk, which raises up. The little guy raised up and looked up at Beach and looked and looked and looked. And then suddenly she went and kissed the cat on its nose. And Beach just flopped over in her belly, you know, like completely submissive. And so then the little chipmunk jumped on her and laid there for a while, and they played, and then she ran off. It's like, well, isn't that interesting? You see, there was an interference from her cat instincts by her domesticated nature. You know, she wasn't hungry. She's a well-fed cat, so she didn't really need that little chipmunk for food. But her old instincts did kick in. And then something interfered. I want to talk about that today as it relates to us, because it really, really does. One of our great teachers, Raymond Charles Barker, used to say, he was in New York, once the basics are met, food, water, shelter, you know, just the basics, then we're freer to explore the meaning of our existence. And in the context of that, we can explore and discover more about who we are. Okay, so when we're in survival mode, we don't really consider the meaning of life as much as we do when we've got these things taken care of. Like the cat, we're well fed, right? So at the time, there's an inner mechanism at any time. Anytime we're faced with a challenge, something that wants us, you know, demands a reaction, outer stimuli, there's also that possibility that there's something in us that interferes with the temptation to retaliate, to punish, to grab our good regardless of the consequences. I know when we were teenagers, we were pretty good at that. Teenagers love instant gratification. We sometimes hang on to that. But we would grab our good, what we called our good, regardless of the consequences. And for some people, that could be cheating on a test. It could be stealing your girlfriend's boyfriend. It could be all kinds of things. But you think you're getting your good, and you're not thinking ahead about what the effects of your actions are. But with a little growth, a little more maturity, we begin to understand that we don't have to do that, that there's another way to respond to life. The great mystic of the 11th century, Meister Eckhart, said, the purpose of the prophet, now he could have been talking about Buddha or Jesus or anybody, Einstein or himself. Meister Eckhart was a great prophet. He said their purpose is to interfere. And that's what he did in his day. He was interfering with the accepted religious ideas of his day, which were pretty harsh. And he was persecuted for his beliefs. He was able to talk himself out of being put to death or imprisoned because he was so beautifully loving and benign that they just couldn't do it to him. But that was his job, was to interfere with the accepted truth of the day. And the innovators in any field do that. That's what they do. Steve Jobs did it. Think about what he did. He interfered with our usual way of communicating and gave us all these new devices to stay connected. That's what artists and musicians do if they're doing their job. They are interfering with our perception of things. The way we hear music, for example. I always think of Miles Davis, the great jazz trumpet player who was a master of two things, the bebop and ballads. He could play a ballad like nobody's business. But there came a time when he kind of set all that aside and created something called fusion music. And it was a fusion of jazz and funk, and it was really different. And he got vilified for it. All the musicians said, oh, he's sold out, he's not Miles anymore. But he was innovating. And of course, pretty soon they were all copying him. I mean, everybody was doing it, right? It became a new music genre. So the interference in us might be felt as our conscience when we're younger. Your brother probably said, listen to your conscience. Well, it speaks to us like you shouldn't do that. Or if we ignored it, it comes to us as guilt. There's a mechanism in our mind, and it's not a punishing mechanism. It's saying, you're better than that. And we know it. You know when you've done something that was beneath you, right? Of course you do. We all do. So as we grow and explore the meaning of being human, maybe we come to realize it's the true self speaking. And it's acting as a guide, and we could call that our inner divinity. We could call that the universal aspect of our nature. We have a very personal aspect, and we have a universal aspect. And the personal aspect is, who I think I am in the world, and the universal is the field of imagination, where I can tap into the quantum potential, where everything is just awaiting somebody's use of it, we might say. So this interference is kind of a nudge to see ourselves from a higher point of view and to act accordingly. The other day on Facebook, I posted something. That saying, today's the first day of the rest of your life? Well, so I posted something that said, the last day of your life was yesterday, up until now. Trying to make the point that everything that has happened up until now doesn't have to bear on this now moment unless we want it to, unless we bring it into the now moment. In other words, as a spiritual being in this human experience, you and I are always brand new, fresh, remade in the image and likeness of God, if you will, in this moment. With all the potential we've ever had, we still have it now. It doesn't leave us. It's not damaged by the past. It's not diminished by worldly experience. That's a local perception, but it's not true. And so our higher mind interferes with that. When you get down on yourself, isn't there also another voice that says, come on, wake up, go out and do something, be happy, do something for someone else. You talk yourself out of despair or depression or whatever it is by allowing this universal aspect of your own consciousness to have its way with you, to inform you. So the very things we desire to see fulfilled in our life are available to us right now, but we must perform an act of interference on our own train of thought. So let me ask you this. Do you ever find yourself thinking the same things you've been thinking for years? Having the same reactions to certain kinds of people, having the same response to opinions, or it could be anything political, it could be anything, any subject in the world. Have you changed your mind lately is what I'm asking. Have you allowed yourself to be interfered with and let the higher idea come through you? A higher idea than what we're seeing a lot of these days, racism and sexism and homophobia. A higher idea is we are all expressions of one perfect life, diversified for the joy of revealing itself in a myriad of forms. That's a much higher idea than us and them, and they're different, which is so immature, so spiritually immature. It's incredible to me that people can actually think that way. So we have the mental ability to interfere with our own static mental atmosphere, those repetitive thoughts. And you know what sometimes I say to myself when I find myself doing that? I'll just say, stop it, Carol, you don't really believe that. That's an old idea. You don't believe it anymore. Kick it out of your mind. It's not relevant. It doesn't belong with you anymore. Let it go. It's a habituated mind, and there's also that aspect of us that isn't, that's just open and free and ready for a new thought right now. So who is this self that can interfere with itself? It's kind of funny when you think about it. In fact, it's worth thinking about. That in your most negative moments, there's this little nudge of the opposite trying to come through, right? You know that's true. Because eventually it will come through. It's almost impossible to stay completely negative for a long time without losing your mental health. It's almost impossible, because it's the nature of life to see with optimistic eyes, to see the possibility. You know, that's what optimism is you see the possibility where there appears to be none. There always is something greater than the moment that could come through if we just interfere with our train of thought. So this self that we're talking about, I think of it as the I of the me. Now just wipe out all the thing about ego right now. There's a me self, that's the personality, and she knows how old she is and what she does for a living and that sort of thing. But the I self is this free, open spiritual being that is observing everything. You make what some people call the witness within, observing everything that's going on so that it is always available to inform us about what is possible in this moment. What's the higher idea now? That's the I of us. You know, I liken it to if you have a bad habit and then you want to change it, it's the I self that changes it. I'm going to tell you more about that in the next segment. We're going to pause for a little break here because we got some great sponsors who they get to have their say. They get to interfere with us a little bit, which is good. So we thank them in advance for their support, and we'll come right back. I've got some really good things to share with you, so don't go away.
This is a national healthcare alert from the Health Hotline. If you, a family member, or a loved one suffers from knee pain and have Medicare as your primary insurance, we've got great news. You could qualify for a pain-relieving knee brace at little or no cost to you. Get free delivery, and all the paperwork is handled by our accredited suppliers at no charge to you. We also have other pain-relieving braces available for shoulder, ankle, and your back. Call the number on your screen right now to immediately receive a pain-relieving brace at little or no cost.
Everybody wants cheap airfare, but where do you find it? You call Low Cost Airlines. They specialize in cheap flights, discount hotel rooms, cheap car rental rates, and with a best price guarantee. If you want the lowest prices on your airline tickets or other travel services, call now. That's right, call. That's the only way to get these rates. Experts are standing by 24/7 to get you the cheapest airfare and hotel rates available. So don't wait. Call now.
Friend, do you remember when it felt good to withdraw your cash from the bank to expand a business, go on vacation, or buy a new car? Well, today, withdrawing your own cash has become a very risky business. According to the secret war, banks are now required to spy on us for the government and then report any suspicious or unusual behavior. I suggest you get the secret war free. Call the number on your screen or visit online.
Well, welcome back, everyone, and thanks to our sponsors. We've been speaking today about running interference on our own negativity and how that happens. In fact, that's the most important part of this. It's not that we can do it, but what is actually happening. So I left off with a reference to the I self, capital I, and the me self. And there, of course, it's one being, but it's two levels of perception. And the me self perceives the outer world. And as in my case, she knows her name and her age and where her children live and what she does for a living and all that sort of thing. Very useful to remember where you live, right? And where your kids are. But the I self is that part of you and me that sees through appearances, that is able to perceive possibility. In fact, that's what it does all the time. And that I self, you could call it your soul, I guess, if you wanted to. I don't want to muck it up with too many religious references, but it's important to know that it exists. And that when you are down and you feel a little bit of a nudge to lighten up, that's your I self. And when I left off at the break, I started talking about addictions. Okay, if you wanted to stop smoking, let's say you just love smoking, and you know you should quit, but you find it really difficult. And that's because the me self thinks it is addicted or that it can't live without it. Remember at the top we talked about getting our good without thinking about the consequences? That's what smoking is. It's an instant gratification, okay? Or abusive drinking, or even opioids or drugs. It's an epidemic of it in our country right now. All right, so the self that is addicted doesn't want to quit. What does? It's the I self nudging us, informing us. It's saying things like, get some help. Pay attention to that commercial on TV that's talking about that rehabilitation center. Go to a meeting. You see, the abusive drinker would never go to an AA meeting. It's the I self that takes you there. And it's the me self that after a couple of meetings says, I don't think this works. But the I self says, stick to it. Just stick to it. You see what's going on? There is this conversation all the time with this habituated mind, and I'm not calling it negative. It has a purpose. And this non-local perception of life that is our spirit, if you will. Now, in modern New Thought spirituality, it is that self that we are attempting to align with this self. So spiritual maturity is about when the I and the me get together. And one isn't obliterated. That's a misunderstanding of spirituality. You don't kill off your ego. It becomes informed by the high self. It's, in other words, you're not doing battle with it anymore. You're allowing the wisdom to come through you. You're allowing your deep knowing of who you are to inform you in everyday situations so that you're not reacting and reaching and grabbing, but you're very, very present and responding from your whole self, not just from your ego. You know, like the kitty cat, the cat story I told you about, had an instinct to go for that little rodent, but really didn't have a need for it anymore. She had evolved by living with humans, if you will, domesticated. So her other instincts kicked in, and she said, I don't need to kill it, I'll just play with it. It's very much like that. That's why I love animal stories, because they're such an analogy to human behavior. Okay, so let's talk about our collective mind. You know, what we call it collective consciousness or race consciousness or group think. And any group you're in has some beliefs around the group, right? You know, any profession has beliefs about, I remember when I was a hairdresser, they had beliefs about, oh, if it rains, nobody will come in, you know, that kind of silly stuff like that. But everybody has them. But as a people, humans, we have been listening to the me self for a very long time and ignoring the collective wisdom, the collective I self. We need to interfere with our own old religious notions. And we have to rethink our old assumptions about how this universe functions and who we are in it. It's not a case of being a believer or a non-believer. It's about self-awareness, self-discovery, self-responsibility. And it's about knowing that every single human being, whether they're black, white, in between, whatever color they are, or shade of whatever, or educated or uneducated, rich or poor, we are all the same in potential. And that means we all have the ability to see through limitation. See, when I say we all have the same potential, I don't mean we're all going to be rocket scientists or brain surgeons. I mean we all have the potential to live a good, healthy, happy life by seeing through the limitation and tapping into that aspect of our nature that knows how to transform a situation, that knows how to get its good, not by grabbing it, but by generating it, you see. It would be a very different world if every single person understood this, that their mind is their connection to the universe. And what any group calls their religion, their God, their divine, whatever it is, their spirit. There is a greater field of awareness that we tap into with our mind when we think, when we imagine. But how we use that mind is key. We can use it in a very local way, or we can use it in a very non-local way. But when those two start working together, you really got something. It's really, really important. So it's about also, in this modern day, about the collective, I'm speaking now. We need to let science interfere with some of these old, superstitious, dogmatic ideas that religion gave us. I mean, come on. Man in the sky, no feminine energy anywhere. I mean, for heaven's sake. And that has really caused so much trouble on this planet. There's no devil. There's just choices all the time. You know, the devil was an invention, just like Santa Claus, was to get people to behave. You know, it hasn't worked, has it? People are still behaving very badly, whether they believe in a devil or not. You know, they do more harm in the name of God than anything else. So we have to let science interfere with this, because science and spirituality go hand in hand. They really do. They're not two different things. They're both an inquiry into the meaning. They're both an attempt to penetrate beyond form to that which caused it in the first place. That's what we're all doing in spirituality, and that's what science, quantum physics, is attempting to do. Is what is behind all this form? Well, in the old days we said, oh, it's a man in the sky. Well, that's ridiculous. It's a metaphor. So let's get growing and moving forward and eliminating some of this nonsense, because it's causing a lot of trouble in our world. Religion is the cause of most war, and when I say religion, I'm talking about the institution. I'm not talking about personal devotion and wonder and awe and a feeling of presence that you can't name. That's not religion, that's spirituality. There's a difference. But not organized religion, but institutionalized religion. That says, if you belong to this one, you're better than those people. You don't want to be involved in a religion like that. That's setting you up for a lot of trouble and a lot of unhappiness. So I think it'd be pretty easy to make the world a better place for everybody if the whole world understood the power of beliefs and the power of mind and the power of the I self. So as Jesus said, we need to be as little children. And that doesn't mean grabbing our good. That means not thinking so much about what's going on out there, except observing the wonder of it all. Being present in this moment. You know, your hands are a miracle, and your eyes are a miracle, and color is a miracle, and music. I talk about this all the time. I'm kind of a natural mystic, I guess. But here's some little tools I find useful. 1, listen to your self-talk. You know, PBS is doing a special now called Mindfulness Mainstreamed. Well, mindfulness is mainstream. This is no longer woo-woo. This is hard science. That listen to your self-talk and change it. Interfere with it if you don't like what you're thinking. Laugh at yourself. See, don't get upset by your negativity. It's just an old habit. Just replace it, but do it in the moment. Ask, what's a better idea? Or what's a better way to think about this? And be alone as much as you can. You know, we need the balance of inner and outer. We need time to be with ourselves and to be quiet. And if you're alone too much, then get out among them and meet people you would normally not meet and mix with them and see who you are in different circumstances. And finally, read, study, contemplate, and meditate. Those are the tools, and they're all available to everybody right now. So if you'd like to know more about this teaching, come and see me on Sunday morning at 10:30 at the Mesilla Community Center on Calle de Santiago. It's right behind the church that rings the bell every hour. And we'd love to see you there. Everybody's welcome. And it's very simple. We meditate, I talk, and then we share ideas at the end. So we'd love to see you there. You can get on my website, carolcarnes.com or mvcsl.com. You can make a donation via PayPal. You can buy my book, The Way In, on lulu.com. There's all kinds of ways to access this information. So it's been a pleasure being with you once again, and I hope I see you soon. In the meantime, just stay tuned in to the higher self and let it inform you and lead you into a much happier life. Okay, see you soon.